Well, thank you, John, for being here. As Sarah mentioned, you've had such an impressive career, and we're really thankful that you are able to spend time with us today. So in addition to all of your professional experience, like Sarah mentioned that you're a co-CEO at Mrs. Fields, you've also held some really impressive marketing positions at PepsiCo and Pizza Hut. Can you tell us a little bit about your family life? I know you have your lovely wife, Allison, and your boys.
Yeah, Allison and I have been married for 36 years. We met at BYU, and she actually helped put me through the BYU MBA program we worked for 2 years, and she helped raise enough money to cover most of the tuition, so she was great. I have 4 boys. They're all grown up and gainfully employed. They're 26 to 35 years of age and live close by. So it's great we get to see each other a lot.
Yeah. Oh, that is great. So you mentioned, Allison was so important, of course, during your MBA program and while you were at BYU. And what lessons have you learned from your MBA that you've applied to your personal life?
I didn't have any business experience or education going in the MBA program. I was a communications undergraduate. I had never had an accounting class or a finance class or anything remotely to prepare me. And most of my colleagues, this was back in 81 through 83, most of my colleagues were all business undergrads. And so I was learning accounting for the first time and finance and all this stuff. And I was scared to death. And I really struggled. I struggled on the business stuff just to barely keep my nose above water and keep from drowning. And I was worried that I wouldn't learn all these important skills that, and honestly, in the things that I've done, which have been mostly marketing-oriented leadership, I really haven't used the specific skills. But what I did learn, and I didn't recognize until I was out of the program, it was the thinking, working in study groups, teams. It was the debate that I had with my colleagues. It was the hallway arguments about cases, about life, and probably the experience I had of being with a very aggressive, driven group of people who were bright, and to learn how to think, express myself. And those were the skills that I learned, I think, from the MBA program that have been valuable for me.
Oh, that's great. So we mentioned you were recognized this year by Ernst & Young as being Entrepreneur of the Year in the social category, which was very exciting. So, with that kind of recognition and your experience that influenced you receiving that honor, we know that you are, and just me personally working with you, I know that you are a big advocate of taking risks. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Any time in your career that you feel like you've taken a risk that's really moved you forward professionally or personally, what you learned from it?
Sure, and I would preface that with, I believe in innovation and I believe in change. I think organizations that are thriving and doing well do so because they're constantly challenging the status quo. They're constantly looking for better ways, new ways to do things. And the great organizations that I've worked with, when we've been successful, we've been in that kind of a role and that kind of a model. And I had the great opportunity and privilege of spending 10 years within the PepsiCo system when they owned Pizza Hut. And so those years I was employed at Pizza Hut in a marketing level position. And it was a great period to be there because PepsiCo had acquired Pizza Hut just shortly before I came on board. And Pepsi had a culture of innovation, a culture of change, a very driven, success-oriented culture. And Pizza Hut was a pretty sleepy conglomeration of a lot of different franchisees who desperately needed some consolidation, some new ideas and thinking to move forward. And one of the early projects that I was given was to work in the area of promotions for the company. And so one of the things that we did is we tied in with properties that would provide equity and value for the brand. And we started doing a lot of things. One of the things that we found success with was attaching ourselves to movie promotions. And we'd had some modest success in that arena, and I was in charge of a team that had an opportunity to tie into the sequel to Back to the Future. And this is back 1989, and it's been kind of fun for me this past year, because 2015 was the year that Marty went to Back to the Future too, right? So I was intimately involved with the scripting, everything else, because we were the major sponsor of that movie, which is why, if you watch it, Pizza Hut is in there.
Yeah, I remember.
And I learned a lot about the movie industry, and it was a really big thing for us. It was going to be our holiday promotion that year, and we were going to invest a significant portion of our marketing funds. And the tie-in was going to be not only the movie, but there were going to be these futuristic sunglasses called solar shades that everybody in the movie would be wearing, and we would sell them as self-liquidating premiums for $1.99 with purchase of pizza. And so I was so excited, one, that we were able to snag the relationship, and two, that we could do something really, really big for that holiday period. And long story short, it was a failure of epic proportions for a couple of reasons. One, the movie was a horrible flop. It was not well done. And compared to the first movie, it didn't do well. Number two, I ordered 2 million pairs of sunglasses as self-liquidators. They were made overseas, shipped in, that I felt that we would be able to liquidate, and we only sold about, 20 million, not 2 million,
wow.
20 million. We only sold 2 million. So I had 18 million pairs of sunglasses that we didn't sell because the movie was a flop, and the reason we didn't sell them is because the sunglasses never made it to the final cut. And while I saw all of the sequences where Michael J. Fox was wearing them and the key characters were wearing one of the 4 pairs that we were selling, Robert Zemeckis, in the end, the director, decided to cut all that stuff, and that was his artistic prerogative. And the week before the premiere, they were out of there.
Wow.
You can imagine the embarrassment for me. I was there. Steve Reineman was the CEO, later became the chair of Pepsi, now the dean of Wake Forest MBA program there. But he's sitting there. We actually rented the whole theater out in Wichita, Kansas to hold the premiere. They flew in all the celebrities for the movie, and we're all there in the theater. I'm there with my family. We all got brought in by limos. It was the whole red carpet thing, and I'm sitting there. None of us have seen the final version yet, so this is it. We're there for the premiere, and the embarrassment on 2 levels. Number one, the movie was a hard PG-13. Should have been an R.
Oh, no, yeah.
And Pizza Hut was a very family-oriented culture, and we had all these families there, and it was hard. And it embarrassed Steve Reineman, who we called the Clean Marine because of his ethics. But the movie was horrible. The premiere didn't go well. We didn't sell the solar shades. It cost us everybody's bonus that year. I single-handedly was responsible for us missing our EBITDA plan to PepsiCo because of the write-off of those 18 million. We missed our plan by over $30 million that year, and nobody got a bonus. So not only did the idea not work, I cost everybody their bonus. I couldn't, if I could have dug a deep enough hole to bury myself in, I would have done it. I was devastated. I was sure that I would be fired. That was without question. I put my resume out just after Christmas and started working on what I knew would have to be my next job if I could ever get one and come out from the shame of the event. And Steve Reineman came down about the second week after Christmas down to my office. Now that never happened because I never saw him once in the years prior on the marketing floor. And he actually came in, and I thought, oh wow, I'm getting fired literally by the CEO. He's going to come into my office. He came in, he shut the door, and he sat down. And the thing that he said was remarkable. He said, "Did you learn anything?" And I was like at a confession. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wish I would have done this, and this didn't happen right. And if we could have just, I'm just blubbering on. He says, "No, John," he said, "did you learn this important thing? I want to make sure." He said, a year ago, when you undertook this, he said, I was blown away. It was big. He said, you thought big. He said, you stepped up to the plate to hit a home run. Not a single or a double, but a home run. And he said, and you whiffed. You struck out. But here's the thing. If that experience has caused you to be risk averse and all you're going to do from now on is hit safe singles and doubles, I don't want you in my organization. But he said, if you are able and willing to swing for the fence He said, I want to keep you on the team. And I was just dumbfounded. And he got up and he left. A month later, he promoted me.
Wow.
So you can imagine culturally the signal that sent to the organization. Here's a guy who clearly failed by epic levels of proportion, and yet, because of the magnitude of the idea, was given a second chance. And so it said, one, risk is okay. Number two, we're not going to succeed with every risk we take. Number three, we fail forward. The following year, we tied into a movie called Land Before Time, and we doubled our bonuses the next year. And had I not had that experience with Steve Reinem and given the assurance that you can take risk and you can make some big things happen, I would not have gone on either with that idea, maybe not in my career. I would have played it safe. And that is one thing I've learned from that experience is to not be afraid to take risk and not be afraid to fail. It will happen. And to embrace failure in your culture as long as you're failing forward and learning from those failures that you do.
You know, those are all really great lessons. I think we actually have a clip of the solar shade spot, if we can see it, just
Great.
to help everyone
These days, everyone's
understand.
going to the future, where people are looking at the world through very different glasses. Now bring part of Back to the Future back with you. Drop by any Pizza Hut restaurant, get a pair of futuristic solar shades, inspired by the movie Back to the Future Part 2. Only $1.99 with any Pizza Hut pizza. Collect a different pair each week while supplies last. Solar shades from Pizza Hut. They're going like there's no tomorrow. Pizza Hut, making it great.
So it definitely seems like it had everything to make it work, the campaign, and I think that's such an important lesson that sometimes we do the very best we can and it just doesn't work out, but being comfortable with taking the risk, and I think that's such a great story. And I know you've mentioned also just recently, it seems that PepsiCo is using that story as part of their encouraging employees to take that attitude and to be comfortable with pursuing hard things.
Yeah, I ran into a colleague who helped write the HR curriculum for senior leadership for all PepsiCo levels 14 and above, which is kind of their designation of senior leadership. And that's a case study that everybody goes through. And both the elements of the bigness of the idea and taking risks, the things that were learned, but the outcomes for Pizza Hut after that, because there was a period of about 4 years after that year, certainly not because of me alone, but because of many people in the organization who took risks, and for a period of about 4 years drove double-digit growth and many of the years were 20% same-store sales because the organization was charging hard, grabbing risks, and moving the brand forward.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Thanks for sharing that with us. And I know that you mentioned this focus on innovation. That's part of what Ernst & Young recognized you for when they named you Entrepreneur of the Year. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've used innovation to really grow Children's Miracle Network hospitals? So, back in 2011, when you started, I think we were raising around $250 million a year. This year, we've grown that by about $100 million. So $360 million just in 4 years. It's an incredible amount of growth, I think, for any for-profit company, but especially a nonprofit. Can you tell us what you attribute that kind of growth to?
Well, one of the things that I learned and believed in and had a strong sense, if I ever had complete latitude to design an organization, I would create a today team and a tomorrow team. And I'm a firm believer that innovation and ideas have to belong in a group that is singularly focused on them, and that means that they've got a distant target in terms of performance and results. And typically what happens is organizations give innovation to people who they want to deliver today performance and also deliver tomorrow. And so the thought of having a today team, which is the typical everybody who works on today's revenue, but having a group that is not accountable for any revenue creation for the short term, for the next year or whatever, but to create that team to work exclusively on the long term was something I wanted to do. So when I came to Children's Miracle Network Hospitals, we created the Cause Innovation team. And we took 6 individuals who were highly creative and actually pretty important to our in-year short-term fundraising creation, and just put them on the long term and gave them the opportunity to work on new ideas and new thinking. And so what's been interesting about that is the team has worked on some really great ideas, but they've also infused in our culture a sense of everybody innovating and being creative within what they do. And I think a lot of our growth has come as a result of creativity in the short-term ideas as well as developing some long-term initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's really interesting how you've had this very successful career in the for-profit world and then have moved over into the nonprofit. You know, we've learned in business school about the importance of pivoting as a company when strategy really calls for it. I think it's interesting to see how you've been able to kind of pivot your career to go to a nonprofit. Can you tell us a little bit about how you made that decision and if you ever planned to work for a nonprofit or how you kind of decided that was a good fit for you?
Yeah, the decision found me, I would have to say, and I'm grateful that it has. This has been by far the best thing that I've ever done, the most enjoyable, the most demanding, the most creative, the most fun. But I was approached by a recruiter, which quite often happens. We get those calls. And the call, I had honestly never thought about a nonprofit opportunity. My opinion was nonprofits were the minor leagues, and that for-profit was the major leagues. That's where talented people went. That's where the real creative, dynamic business happens, and it didn't happen in non-for-profits, and I was very wrong in that. Fortunately, the recruiter was perceptive and persistent and said, John, this is the perfect opportunity for you. This organization is looking for someone who's got marketing experience, who has creative vision, who sees things differently that will help take it to a different level. And I kept telling her no, and she kept calling me back. And she was so persistent, I thought, well, at least if I tell her, okay, send me all the stuff, I'll kind of get rid of her, and she'll quit bugging me. And so she did. She sent me a packet of material. And in that material, there was a lot of great stuff. And but the thing that got me was a DVD that had a compilation of what we call now champion stories. These were stories about kids in hospitals across North America who have been treated, and as a result of the funds that we raise, it made a difference in their life. And well, yes, it was emotional, and it touched me in that sense. I had an experience that I didn't anticipate, and that was I had this kind of look back on my career and recognize that while I had done some things that were great for me personally and my family, I'd had a good income, I'd had some great interactions, and I'd learned some things. I really had this question about, is the world any better because of what I've done? Is the world better because I sold another box of Cheerios, or because another slice of pizza, or we made more money for Pepsi? And that started to eat on me. And I hadn't anticipated that. I had never had, I guess, that kind of a moral compass in terms of giving back to the world. That just wasn't kind of my psyche. And it bothered me, so I called the recruiter and I said, well, tell me a little bit more. I still don't think it's the right opportunity for me. I don't think I would enjoy doing it, but you know, I'm interested because I can see some meaningful things that could happen here. And that just led, the more I learned, the more I wanted the opportunity. And it got down to the final interview selection process where I was against a couple of other individuals. And I literally, at the point, I thought, if I don't get this opportunity, I'm going to kill myself. Because this is like the greatest thing I could ever be able to do. I just, you know, and 5 years later, it was actually 5 years this week that I started. It's been the funnest, most dynamic, challenging, but more important, I don't ever feel that it's work. I feel that it's, you know, it's, in my first month, I met with the CEO of Cook Children's in Fort Worth. And a very wise and savvy gentleman who's now on our board. But we sat down at the table, and the first thing that he said, he just looked me in the eye and he said, John, he said, this is not a job. He said, what we do, he said, this is a calling. And I feel that way about it. I feel that what we do, because it impacts the lives of so many kids, and is great. But the one thing I would tell all of you is that you can find meaningful opportunities in the non-profit sector that are just as fulfilling as anything dynamic in the for-profit. And you can, you know, things like compensation, challenge, everything that you're looking for, I think, in a for-profit career, they are out there in not-for-profit. And I think non-for-profit has gotten a bad rap over the years and has come a long way, because if you're going to be successful in not-for-profit, you have to run it just like you would a for-profit business.
Right. I think that has been the most interesting thing that I've learned working with you. I think I was the next hire after you. So it's been a really incredible 4 years to see us increase our fundraising, over $100 million in such a short amount of time. And I think that I've really learned a lot from you just on the importance of culture and teamwork. I know one of the first things you did as CEO is meet one-on-one with every staff member. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you felt that was important?
Yeah, one of the things I believe in, and I didn't create this, it's out there in a lot of books and case studies, but I think great organizations are built on, number one, a solid strategy that then creates a solid structure, and structure is more than an org chart. It's process, it's how you do things, it's plans, operating plans that come out of this. And then the third thing is culture. So strategy, structure, culture, and in that order. But I do believe in the quote by Peter Drucker, which is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Mm-hmm. So of the three, culture is by far the most important. And recognizing that, I don't think any organization can spend too much time on culture. In an organization like PepsiCo, that was considered soft. You were considered a weak leader if you spent time on culture. And I think as a result, a culture at PepsiCo when I was there had immense turnover. It was if you could last more than a couple of years there, it was remarkable, just because you got chewed up and spit out, or you got fired, and pushed to move on. So I felt, and still feel today, that as we work on culture, it will create the basis for everything else working. And that's why I spent the time of interviewing every employee in the organization. And we're not that big. At the time, we had about 100 of us, so it wasn't all that difficult. But I had a couple of fundamental questions. What's working? What's not working? And are we using your talents and abilities to the best effectiveness in the organization? And in those three questions, I learned more about the culture, structure, and strategy of what was going on, and it really set an agenda for me to work on. So I would encourage anyone to invest in those activities. I spent a lot of time visiting hospitals, asking questions around culture and how we impacted their culture and what we did. And to this day, as you know, Miranda, we still spend time working on our culture, and we talk about the elements of our culture that are working and the ones that aren't working, and what we're going to do to change and make our culture an effective culture to support the strategy and structure that we put together.
Right. That's been so great just to see, and I know that there are many of us who've learned a lot just from going through that process. So as you've been CEO and president at some of the most recognized brands in the country. You've also had these really impressive senior marketing jobs at other huge companies. And now as CEO of Children's Miracle Network Hospitals, we work every day with some of the world's largest companies, Fortune 1 to 500 companies. And what kind of similarities have you seen just from working with that caliber of organizations that are some consistent themes, I guess, and why you think they're successful?
Well, we have the privilege and opportunity of working with over 90 corporate partners. They raise 2/3 of the money that we raise each year. Walmart's the largest. We also raise a lot of money with Costco and with many other great partners that are dedicated to this same mission. And the thing that I've learned consistent throughout my career, and very much so in what we do here, is that everything is built on relationship. Mm-hmm. And so while you may have the most intelligent argument, you may have whatever else on your side in terms of driving an initiative forward, if you do not have the relationship, you're not going to go very far, at least for the long term. And so one of the things that has been inherent in our culture since day one and continues, I think, to be an important aspect of that is the relationships that we have with people. Mm-hmm. And I think every business is a people business. And I don't think you can ever overestimate the value of interpersonal skills, the ability to communicate, the ability to be empathetic, the ability to be a good listener before you are a great persuader and presenter and debater. You, I think, have to have those skills of empathy. And I think those have been important for me, and I think a consistent thread across everything we do. And I think you can sometimes put too much stock in intelligence trumps everything, and I think relationship and connection trumps everything, and not intelligence.
That's great. So, in terms of developing those kinds of listening skills and those relationship building skills, where did you learn to be so good at that? Did you have a mentor early in your career, or do you have them still that you've learned from, and what have you learned from them?
I am still struggling to learn them and to use them. I've had some great leaders along the way. But you know what? I've had some great bad examples.
Yeah, it can be.
And probably the bad examples have been the bad mentors have helped me more than the good mentors. Particularly within the PepsiCo culture, I had a few bosses that were just great examples of what not to do. And because of the way it made me feel, it was everything that you see and read in books about negative style of management and egocentric or narcissistic style of a manager that really pushed me away from that and said, you know what, as I get increasing responsibility, opportunity to work with and to manage people, I'm going to be a servant leader, and everything around that that is important. And so, and yes, I've worked for some really good, servant leaders along the way that have taught me and modeled some of the things that, I certainly steal and borrow from as I try to move forward.
That's great. So, those of us who work with you, we know that you have a huge love for the outdoors and for competition and athletic competition specifically. So this year, I think you won Lotoja, right? The really challenging bike race, which is so impressive. And I know you're a really passionate backcountry skier and snow biking, and you're always doing these really exciting, adventurous things. Can you tell us a little bit about, you seem, and I believe you to be the kind of person that if you see a mountain, you really want to climb it. Have you always been that way, and do you think that translates into the business world?
Well, I think like probably all of us here, you wouldn't be in this program if you didn't have a certain drive and ambition to your life. And in my growing up years, it was never anything athletic. It was more around music and school and academics that I felt highly competitive and driven to want to perform and to want to do better. As I got married and started raising boys and got into boy kind of things, I found a lot of those passions and interests being translated into athletic endeavors. My wife actually got me into running and doing marathons, and that probably started the whole fitness endurance thing. Thankfully, because she's a great cook and I would weigh double what I weigh without some of that. But along the way, I've done a lot of really fun things. I'm not really particularly gifted or good, but I have learned a couple of things. One, persistence pays off, and so I'm a little bit nutso and crazy. There's been hardly a year in the last 30 that I haven't ridden at least 10,000 miles on my bike,
Wow.
and usually 1,000 or more running miles a year. And it's just kind of one of those addiction, stupid things that I'll get up at 3 in the morning if I have to get my workout in, but I will not miss my workout just because it sets the day and helps me feel better. But I think some of the things I've learned are never give up. And I've been in many races where I was just doing horribly, and it would have been so much easier to just drop out and quit. But I just have this driving, I don't ever want to have a DNF, the did not finish designation after my name on any set of results, even if I come in dead last, which I have many times. And so this notion of just not giving up, but in that learning of pushing and being persistent and not giving up, I've learned some great things. I've been in a number of races where I was dead last and just feeling so lousy. It was like, I don't even know if I can finish it, let alone be at all competitive. But then something happened, and I kind of pushed through that barrier of mental fatigue, which is really what it's about, and then physical, and actually ended up winning because things just started to turn around. And had I given up, that wouldn't have happened. I think that's true in our business careers in life, is that we hit these impasses of, wow, I don't want to, this is painful, this isn't working, this is terrible, I'm going to quit. Not to quit, to be persistent, to push through, alter your course if you need to, alter your strategy, but don't give up. And I think that's what I've enjoyed and learned from all the crazy competitive stuff. It is a great outlet for me to burn off steam. It's a great think tank to be on a bicycle and mindlessly riding mile after mile, because it's a creative time for me, and it's obviously a health benefit. And I just, I'm a big believer on that. I think if you're not healthy physically, it's hard to be healthy mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And so I just think it's that whole total package. So it's something I really believe in. I'm delighted that I have a wife who supports that. And this morning I was on the spin bike, and she was off with her trainer lifting weights, and then came home and ran on the treadmill. And
wow, that's great.
It's great to be 60 and still, I can still do what I did when I was 22, and I intend to be 80 and 90 years old and still racing bikes and backcountry skiing and climbing mountains, and I don't want to give up.
It's a good lesson for all of us. I think, looking at your love for pursuing challenges and being really competitive, I think that relates back to Children's Miracle Network hospitals. So soon after you became CEO, we set a very ambitious goal to what would be quadrupling our annual fundraising. So going from about $250 million a year to raising $1 billion a year within 10 years. Can you tell us a little bit about why you felt setting such an ambitious goal was important, and how we've, just some of the lessons that you've learned as we've been working on it the last few years?
I think goals are very, very important, obviously, and I think you have to set those goals, and they have to be smart goals, and you have to have something that you can set your targets to and against and achieve. It's not a personal goal. One of the interesting experiences I had when I started and I did those interviews, I had a lot of our employees who said, whatever you do, don't come up with some dumb $1 billion goal, because there had been a prior CEO who kind of had lobbed it out there. And I think the organization felt that it was his personal legacy goal, and it was about him and not about the organization. So, I took this all and said, oh, okay, thank you for the feedback. As part of that exercise where I went out and I met with those hospitals, one of the questions I had for the hospitals, and we have 170 member hospitals, I wanted to know what success looked like. So one of the questions I had was, how much money do you need? I didn't know if the $234 million we had raised the prior year was enough, more than enough. I had to calibrate. I needed to know what success looked like. And what I heard was staggering. And it's still true today, 5 years later. These hospitals said, we need a ton more. And I said, how much more? I bugged every nurse, every surgeon, every fundraiser, every child life specialist, anybody who would listen. I just said, how much do we need? How much more do you need? And the number that I got back was uncanny in terms of its consistency. It was 4 times more, 400% more. Wow. I was like, well, that's ridiculous. We can't. 400% increase? We can't do that. That's too difficult. And as I thought about it and met with those of us in the organization that are the leaders, just said, are we going to rise the challenge? Do we want to meet the, what's been given to us as success by the hospitals? And we made that decision. And so 400% times roughly 250 million is $1 billion. And so with great reluctance, I thought, oh, here comes a new CEO, and I'm going to make my first mistake. But we, as a leadership group, set that goal for 2022 and said, we're going to quadruple our fundraising. And it has been, I think, very motivating, because it's not about us or our leadership or our legacy. It's about what the kids need and what hospitals have told us. This is what we need, and this would be a definition of total success. So I love that we have an ambitious goal. It's scary sometimes, as you know.
Right.
But I think it's forced us out of the box of saying, let's be complacent with 2 to 5% growth and say we need dynamic double-digit growth if we're going to hit those kind of numbers, and it's caused us to take some risks and to innovate and to push in a way that we wouldn't have if we were on a nice, conservative, consistent pathway.
What do you think that does for morale? Just that not only that you've seen at CMN hospitals, but in other places that you've worked when there is a really ambitious and sort of scary goal that everyone's working toward?
Well, I think as humans, we love to be challenged. I really do. And I think some of us get scared, but I think at the end of the day, we want to be on a team that is reaching for excellence, and I think that wants to achieve aggressive goals. And I think there's so many examples in our culture when that happens. I think the one I absolutely love is Kennedy in the 60s saying, let's put a man on the moon. That was so preposterous and absurd and impossible and crazy and stupid. But at a time when the country was in a bit of a malaise, the Russians were ahead of us in the Cold War, we were more about fear than faith. As a leader, he was able to instill something that actually happened because it mobilized a whole country and created a culture of success that, and I think that's a great historical example, there are many of them, that organizations that have those high aspirational goals that push, it's a great place to be in. Yes, it's stressful, but it's fun. I mean, you look back on it and we want to be challenged.
Yeah, definitely. Can you tell us a little bit about, you've touched on the fact that you're a big believer in exercise, and I'm curious if you have a daily routine that you follow. Like what does a typical morning look like for you? So you're getting ready for the day.
In the wintertime, it's a lot of indoor cycling. Since cycling is my number one passion, I tend to do a lot of that. So last night I was on the treadmill instead of just watching TV passively, if I do watch TV, I'll usually be on the treadmill running or walking. And this morning I was on a spin bike. I have this great thing called Peloton, which allows me to take a live spin class from New York City. And I like it because it has a leaderboard on it where you're competing with everybody in the class in New York City as well as people all over the world, like me, who have logged in. And it measures watts, which is a good, consistent way of putting everybody on an even competitive scale. And so not only having just mindless spinning away on a bike, but having a leaderboard where you can compete against people, and an instructor in New York who says, hey, John Salt Lake City is my handle on the John SLC, and she's like, John SLC, come on, you can do it. It's kind of remarkable that we can use technology that way, but that's what I did this morning. And during the summer months, I have a good friend who is about my age and likes to compete in mountain bikes, and we meet every morning at 5 a.m. in North Salt Lake, and we do a 30-mile route on Bonneville's Shoreline Trail above the avenues over to the zoo and back. And I love it because we start with lights. Usually it's always dark at 5 a.m., and we watch the sun come up, and we get to hear the coyotes howl up there, and we run into other wildlife, and we push each other because it's always competitive. I'm trying to hurt him, he's trying to hurt me. But 3 hours later, I'm home and showered, and I'm pumping and exhilarated, and the rest of my day goes well because I've had this, great start. Someone once told me exercise is the one thing that you can count on as a success, only by the fact that you've completed it.
Right.
Whether you did it well or not, it is the one guaranteed check mark if you put it into and there are other elements of our life that we can schedule into our morning and say, I will do this every day. And I think when you have those success check marks that you can count on and that you enjoy, the rest of your day is going to go well because you've already succeeded regardless of whatever else happens. So, but that's my typical crazy routine. So if you ever see little lights above the avenues early in the morning, 2 little lights going along the top, that's Gary and I on our mountain bikes.
Well, great. It definitely seems like there's a theme. So you love to be challenged and have that competition and goal setting, and also this I think, really natural interest in innovation. So from your perspective, what are some companies out there that you think are doing a really great job at innovating right now?
So many are. Almost every startup, every tech company that I see right now, obviously they have to, because they're starting from nowhere or from very small and moving up. There are a lot of established companies, I think, that are risk takers and innovators that are pushing and moving forward. And they're out there. I think Amazon continues to do some really interesting things. I think we've looked at Apple, a company that, in the big mature space that innovates. My experience I think it's industry-centric. Packaged goods, which is where I started, is very risk-averse. And partially by design, because they have to build big multi-million-dollar plants every time they put an idea in practice, so they're very methodical. But one of the reasons I left the packaged goods industry and moved into the restaurant industry is that, for that reason, is that restaurants by design are more aggressive in terms of innovation, and their risks are lower. If you have a new product and it fails, your risks are a lot lower than if you're General Mills and you create a new cereal and you put a new $30 million line in and spend $60 million on marketing and the idea fails. But the restaurant's a great industry in terms of innovation, risk-taking, pace. Things move quickly. You can get an idea quickly from start to finish. That's there. Those would be some of the industries I think that I would look at.
That's great. I think we are just about out of time. I am curious, though, if you can just share with us. I think it's been so wonderful to hear your perspective on working in a nonprofit and being such a well-known leader in that industry. If you can just share with us maybe one of the experiences that you've had in your current role as CEO at Children's Miracle Network Hospitals that has really made you realize it was a great choice for you to move over into this space.
It happens every time I interact with a child who's been impacted by a hospital. And I don't get those frequently enough. They do happen fairly frequently, and I know for you too. But I had a real moving experience that was a reminder of that. About 2 years into the job, I was up at Penn State Hershey Children's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and meeting with them. And I was late for the meeting that morning. Directions got mixed up, and I was going to meet with the CEO of the hospital first. And so, important meeting, and I was harried and I got to get in here, and I was already running late and embarrassed that I would be late. And I was to meet someone in the lobby that would take me up to the CEO. And so I parked the car, got into the lobby, and she said, "We're so glad to have you here." She said, "I have somebody I want you to meet." And I was like, I'm going to be even later for the CEO. And I was just in the wrong place. And she drugged me over to this little girl and her mom who were sitting on the reception area there at the bottom of the hospital. And I could tell that she was really ill. She was in her pajamas, and her head was down on her mother's lap. I could tell that she was really not feeling very well. And they walked me over, and she was one of the children who was being treated on an outpatient basis for cancer there at the hospital. And her name is Sammy. And she had driven with her mom 50 miles from a rural area of Pennsylvania to come in and present me with this cute little wooden plaque that she had decorated. And inside that plaque, she had a little note that said, "John, thank you for coming to visit our hospital." And she had this in her lap, and I walked over, and I was introduced to the family and to this, my reaction was, I'm going to be late, Well, I'm here to meet with the CEO. And she got up and just lifted her head, and I took a great deal of effort. She handed me this little plaque that she had made, and she put her arms around me and she said, "I love you. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for coming." And I just felt about that big. I thought, this is what this is about. It's about these kids. And I recognized the CEOs are not important, what we do. And so it was a reminder that what I do every day and what's important is never the big, it's not even the CEO of Walmart. Very important. But more important than that are 11 million children a year who are impacted by these funds that make the difference for them, like they do for Sammy and everyone else, between, in many cases, life and death, or at least a more comfortable life. And it was just, I always think about that. It's like, don't ever get your priorities messed up. Remember what it is you do and who brought you here.
That's great. Well, thank you, John. I think there are so many really wonderful lessons that you shared with us today, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.